Okay, so we are currently logged into the week 2 module on our course Blackboard page. If we go ahead and click on this using sources presentation, it should open up in Prezi. Okay, great. You'll go ahead and let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. Okay, so this presentation is on using sources in research. This is just your bare bones presentation to give us to lay some of the groundwork as we get going in this course. And it's really important that we do this now because what you're going to be doing this semester is making claims, writing these argument papers, and using evidence to support the claims that you're making in these arguments. Like an attorney, a writer's got to be able to convince his or her audience of the claim being made. And you've got to use evidence to persuade your audience of that claim. So that's where the source material comes in. You're going to use these sources as evidence to really persuade your audience that the claim you're making is valid. What type of evidence you use is really determined on what discipline you're working in. To give you a couple of examples, if you're writing a lab report in the sciences, then you're going to want to pull some hard data from previous experiments. Meanwhile, if you're writing a lit review or a literary analysis, more than likely you're going to want to pull some quotations from that text to make your point. So what type of data you use, what type of evidence you're using in your argument is really just determined based on what discipline you're working in and what your audience is expecting. Now, the process of putting together your argument is called an analysis, and what this means is that a research argument course is labor intensive. To compose an argument, you really have to do some research. And it's your job as the writer and researcher to gather current research. Keyword being current, you want to pull the most relevant information available to you. And that's because if you pull outdated information, it's going to be very challenging for you to convince your audience that your claim is valid. And then once you've got that current research, you're going to want to interpret that information in order to make and support, and then of course test and refine your claim. The interpretation is key because it's not enough to merely state current research. You have to use your interpretation as a way to connect that back to the claim that you're making. The thesis is the focal point of your argument. It is a controlling idea, and it should always be original, it should be assertive, but most importantly, debatable. The thesis should never be a single fact. It should instead be something that another side, an opposing side, could debate. And of course, a strong thesis requires strong evidence. When you incorporate evidence, it's because you've already formulated a claim and a thesis, and now you're going to need evidence to strengthen that thesis and support it. So how do you work evidence into your argument? There are 3 important ways that you need to do this. Number 1, you need to offer evidence that agrees with your stance, and then add to it with your own ideas. Number 2, you need to present evidence that contradicts your stance, and then argue against or refute that evidence to strengthen your position. So it's not enough to state this is my claim and then defend it. You have to look at an argument from the bigger picture. You have to be able to identify what the opposing side's argument is and argue against it to strengthen what claim you're making. And then finally, you need to use quotations to support your assertion, not merely state or restate it, but use those quotations to add to the claim that you're making and strengthen it. Effective use of sources. To effectively use sources, you need to integrate it as smoothly as you possibly can into your essay. And you'll do this in 3 ways: stating your claim, giving your evidence, remembering how to relate it back to the claim, and then commenting on the evidence to show how it supports the claim. So it really is this very full circle process to use sources effectively. And that is, again, a really bare bones presentation, but this is just to lay the groundwork as we get going. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll really start looking at source material more. We'll start looking at how to cite these sources, of course, with the MLA citations, and just the different ways to use evidence and how to incorporate it into our research.